2, 1, and welcome to episode 31 of CBM Voice Chat. I'm your host, as always, Neophant, and with me, as always, is my podcasting partner, AngryBlackManta.
We're back! Yay!
Yes, we're back after a little bit of a brief hiatus. It's partially because, in terms of comic book movies, not necessarily comic book media or TV shows or anything like that, we actually haven't had anything since Spider-Man Homecoming. But in earlier, last month in October, we did get a completely, dark, new comic book movie that, if anything, you couldn't really consider a comic book movie because it's not necessarily based on a specific comic book, but it does feature one of the most popular and well-regarded comic book villains of all time, and that is Joker, the movie by Todd Phillips, and originally having Martin Scorsese as a producer, really hit the big time and has been doing gangbusters at the box office, much to everyone's shock and surprise. And I wanted to ask you, Manta, what were your impressions about hearing about a Joker movie that's not connected at all to any of the prior DC movies?
I was a little bit skeptical because I actually do like Jared Leto as the Joker, and it felt weird that there's just this entirely separate thing going on the side. But for the most part, I was pretty optimistic about it because Scorsese has been tied to it since, almost the beginning.
Did you have any prior experience with Todd Phillips, the director?
So he did The Hangover, right?
Yep, all three of the Hangover films.
Okay, so I've only seen the first one, which I don't even remember how. I remember not even liking it really because that just wasn't my type of humor. Mm-hmm. I might revisit it, but yeah. So that's the only thing I knew about him was that he did The Hangover, and I didn't even know that until just recently before I saw the movie. So yeah, I didn't have any expectations as far as Phillips.
However, the film does star Joaquin Phoenix, and I was wondering if you happen to have any experience with Joaquin's career as an actor. Because I'll be honest, apart from Gladiator and Her, I don't think I've seen any other movies that he's been in.
Obviously I've seen Gladiator, but holy crap, yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen him in other stuff. I just can't remember what it was. But I was freaking ecstatic for him. I mean, that's a big win to get him for a comic book movie. Something that he's been pretty against.
Yeah, he's always stated publicly that he wasn't very fond or interested in doing a comic book film. And I do remember how way back when Doctor Strange was being announced that there were rumors that he was being asked by Marvel to portray the character before he refused, and eventually the role went to Benedict Cumberbatch. So it's kind of surprising that after all of that, he would end up doing a comic book movie called Joker, which I guess as it ends up, and most likely, might only be a one-off film. He might not be planning to reprise the role.
Yeah, because I think his whole thing was he didn't want to do comic book movies, and part of that reason was because he didn't want to do anything that's a franchise. So they better not be doing. After having seen Joker, they better not be planning on doing a second one.
But considering that as of today, Joker has made almost $1 billion without China. Do you think Warner Brothers would not be tempted, or do you think they would be tempted to try to convince Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix to do something within and continue that universe? Do you think they would be willing to do that?
I think there absolutely is a chance that they, or absolutely talk coming from, the executives saying, let's milk it for another movie. And, because that's how they think. It's a business. So, you want more money and you have a stellar product in front of you that's just raking in the cash. So, it'd be kind of stupid not to talk about it, but they better not do it.
Okay.
It's a great one-off movie. It doesn't need to be explored more. You don't need to introduce Batman or anything like that, which I can't believe what I'm saying because that was one of the issues I had with them doing this movie was, no Batman. And it's the same issue I had with Venom. when they announced Venom's, no Spider-Man.
No Spider-Man, yeah.
But it worked out for Joker, and it worked out for Venom actually too. So yeah, they don't need to explore this, this universe anymore.
For sure. And speaking of not needing to explore this universe anymore, I would imagine that if there were plans being announced to develop a Joker sequel, I would imagine that there would be a ton of people who would be very much against the creation of a sequel to this movie, because I don't know if the rest of the audience knows, but this movie has gone through a lot of controversy. Like, ever since maybe like the first trailer came out, there's been script leaks, there's been early screening reports that say that while the movie is really good, it's very problematic, or it's going to inspire people to come up and like commit mass shootings, and there's fears that this movie will like create protests and civil unrest within society, that it's going to live up to that famous meme of "we live in a society," and that people are just going to like get frustrated with the system, and they're going to like go on a rampage. And I have no idea, like, what do you think of all of that?
I think it's entirely to get clicks. It's entirely clickbait. I mean, there's nothing really threatening about this movie at all. There's nothing more threatening about it than, say, Fight Club, or I don't know, just like any other regular movie. It's just a regular movie. There's nothing, it's not going to inspire a huge, uprising or some group, or organize some group. It's just people wanting attention. And there's this like kind of mysticism surrounding the Joker as a character, because of everything that's happened with the actors. And it's just more of that. They're looking for more stories to tell, because it just goes with the character. They try to twist the narrative, so now everyone believes that Heath Ledger killed himself because the Joker was too much, and it's like, that's not it at all.
That's not true at all. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the Joker, really. I mean, he had problems way before, he started playing the Joker, or setting up to play the Joker. And it's the same thing. Like, they're looking at Joaquin Phoenix, trying to find something to, say about him, or, some controversy, with like him starving himself. And it's just like, this is a non-story. It's just attention. They just want attention.
But you don't think at this kind of like current time, especially with the American climate today, that's had a ridiculous number of very widely reported and published record of school shootings, and like people going off and like shooting or stabbing each other, you don't think there might have been a legitimate concern that a movie like The Joker could have could cause more of these incidents to occur?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of like a bold thing to say, but like, not really. I mean, if people are looking at this and thinking they want to do the same thing, then it's not because of the Joker. It's because, they're already going down a bad path. They just found a theme to go along with it. I don't think it's going to inspire anyone, really. No. And it hasn't.
Yeah, actually, that's the other thing. I wasn't sure if you happen to know the story, but one of the more humorous things that that has been inspired by the Joker film is that there's moments in the trailer where we see the Joker dancing on these very large stairs that go down for quite a bit, and that's actually a real place located in the Bronx in New York, and apparently it's become kind of like a mini tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Where people just kind of like go and take pictures and do some dancing, and I'm just like, shouldn't there be safety concerns, especially if they're like going downstairs, and if it's rained beforehand, wouldn't like it be slippery? But I don't know if there's been any issues of people slipping while trying to do a pretend Joker dance, but hopefully that's like the worst of it.
I mean, winter is still, yet to come completely, so we'll see. But the only thing I've heard was that people in the Bronx were like kind of getting pissed because there's all these tourists coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's like the worst of it. It's just good fun. I mean, why can't the press, media, let us have fun?
That's honestly a really good question. I have so many
Right?
possible answers to respond to that, but essentially what I would come down to is that lately it feels like the media has especially in the entertainment industry, has been doing a lot of articles that you could define as clickbait, meaning that they give you headlines or responses from people that kind of stir you into a vigorous emotional state to the point where you want to click, you want to comment, you want to share. And that's kind of like superseded the actual notion of telling an accurate story or reporting accurately or in a neutral tone about what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, reporting is supposed to be objective. It's supposed to be, just about the facts and telling the story with those facts. But yeah, it's become very charged. Like just the other day, I was getting ready to go up in arms because some article said Titans just slammed Man of Steel using the whole "Pa can't maybe" line, and then I came to the episode, and it's like, what? They weren't slamming Man of Steel at all. If anything, they made it better. But yeah, it's just like they're just trying to get a rise out of people, But it's like the reaction should be the exact opposite. I mean, I see a lot of people being inspired by this film, and because it's very low budget, and I see a lot of people, it inspiring a lot of people to start making their own films, which is great.
Okay, so why don't we just get into the actual content of the film itself? And I wanted to kind of ask you, kind of right off the bat, The Joker is a movie that primarily focuses on Joaquin Phoenix's character of Arthur Fleck, this guy who has been through a lot, goes through a lot, and is at his absolute lowest to the point where he eventually decides to become this character known as the Joker. And I wanted to ask you, what did you think of Joaquin Phoenix's performance? Did you think he was very accurate with the way that he portrayed the kind of character that he was portraying? And do you think it's worth him getting an Oscar maybe someday down the line?
I think absolutely he should earn an Oscar for it, because something I've been learning recently and just been focusing on learning more about is just that emoting is not acting. And it came a lot from this last season of Game of Thrones, how everyone was like, raving about these performances. And it's like, these aren't really performances. They're just making faces. Acting is about telling a story. And that's something I was like completely focused on looking for, was whether, what Joaquin Phoenix was doing was just, emoting, or was he actually telling a story? And he's absolutely telling a story, and he tells it brilliantly. And with the character of Arthur, that was actually one of the big things people were concerned about, was like, oh, well, they're sympathizing, teaching you to sympathize with evil people. And it's like, well, first of all, we should sympathize. Second of all, it's just a story. And third of all, when you actually get down to it, I didn't really feel bad for him. At least not entirely.
You don't think of him as a sympathetic character? Do you think that with all the things that he goes through in the film, all the pain, the violence, the potential causes for his psychological conditions, in the end, after he makes all those choices that he does at the end of the film, and we'll probably go into full spoilers later on in this discussion, you don't think he comes off as a sympathetic or like an anti-hero of any sort?
Well, I wouldn't say he doesn't come off as sympathetic, because there are certain moments where I feel a lot of sympathy for him. But it's in moments. It's not like the entire time I feel bad for them. Because he is making choices. And, like there's some parts that, get me without going too into spoilers. Like the scene on the bus, where the lady tells him off for making faces at her kid. And it goes a little bit deeper, and it shows that like he has an actual condition where that causes people to misunderstand what he is, and to misunderstand him as a person, because he doesn't actually find these things amusing. It's just how his body reacts. So those parts are like sympathetic, because he's he's laughing on the outside, but he's like actually crying on the inside. But then, like I said, he does make choices, and at the end of the movie, I do not feel bad for him because he, while not mentally stable at all, he still seems to be in his has enough control over his faculties to make decisive, to be very decisive.
So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're essentially saying that he's, despite all of his conditions, despite the fact that he cannot control sometimes laughing spontaneously, despite all the crap that has been going through him in his childhood and into his adult life, that in the end, he could have made choices. He could have still done something different. But because this is a movie that's called Joker, and because you kind of get an idea of who the Joker is as a comic book character, that he would eventually become a character that emulates and embodies that personification of the Joker, that he's going to go out. He's going to commit crimes. He is going to essentially be a villain. He's essentially going to be such a strong, voracious presence in Gotham City that it would inspire, or it would have to have a person like Batman come up and try to beat him up every time he tries to commit crimes. And that's kind of the thing that I actually have a little bit of an issue with Joker, is that in the end, this incarnation of the Joker, while he embodies one aspect of the Joker's personality, which is that he's unpredictable, he's wild, he's crazy, he's super violent, he'll sometimes make a joke before shooting you, he doesn't necessarily embody a realist, or not necessarily realistic, but like an accurate comic book version of the Joker. He's nothing like Mark Hamill's portrayal in the Batman animated series. He's nothing like how Heath Ledger was in The Dark Knight. He's like a completely brand new, different character. And I was wondering if you happen to agree with me, or do you think by being a completely different character, in a way, Joker is embodying exactly who he's supposed to be?
I think, well, it makes sense because Todd Phillips was pretty open about, he didn't base this off any comic books. He's not a comic book fan. He's just, was given this character. He chose to, make a story off of this character and make it his own. So it's not surprising that he's not completely Joker, comic book Joker. But I feel like at the end, they did actually make the transition. Because in the last scene, which is very memorable, he seems to be embracing that full Joker character. So yeah, I could definitely see him meeting Batman and being this arch enemy of Batman later on. And actually developing actual plans, because he doesn't really develop any plans in this movie.
Not really.
Nothing
he
that
just
he
kind of
does.
stumbles into everything that he does. He does make a choice near the second act where he's like, I'm going to go on this TV show and I'm going to do something to somebody or himself. And in the end, he changes his mind and does something different. And do you think that was necessarily inspired by the comics?
Well, how do you mean? Like,
okay, so let's just go into spoilers. The Joker brings a gun into a talk show that's hosted by Murray Franklin, who is a TV show host played by Robert De Niro, and they have a conversation. And within that filming of that episode, it's revealed that Arthur was the one who had basically instigated this whole crazy thing happening in Gotham with the murder of these 3 people. And he tells it to Murray Franklin like it's a joke. And that leads into very heightened tensions before finally Joker pulls the gun and shoots Murray Franklin. And that's kind of like a huge moment in the film. And part of me does think it's reminiscent of how he kills a lot of people in The Dark Knight Returns, which is a book written by Frank Miller, drawn by Klaus Janson, I believe. And people were kind of expecting, if this movie involves him going into a talk show, people are going to die. Yeah.
Okay, so I get what you're saying. Yeah, it does seem very reminiscent of The Dark Knight Returns, but I also feel like it was just a natural progression of the story. Like, he always wanted to be on that show. He always wanted to meet Murray Franklin. And then just like the events of his life have actually enabled him to meet Murray Franklin and be on the show. But by that point, by the time he gets to that point, he has already, lost it. And so he just decides to bring a gun. And it just felt like a natural progression. Not like they're really paying homage and sticking to the comic book character, but it's just natural that they came to that conclusion. Which is something I really like about this movie is that one of my problems with the Dark Knight, which I don't like, I've probably said before, but I don't think it's that good as I used to think it was.
We'll have that argument someday. Absolutely.
Yeah, but anyways, one of my problems with it is that the Joker has all these elaborate plans, and despite claiming that he doesn't have any plans, he has these ridiculously convoluted plans that always work. But with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, bad stuff starts happening, and this whole movement starts, and one scene, when he's going on his way to the Murray Franklin show or whatever, he's being chased by the cops, and he doesn't plan for anything to happen. He didn't plan to lose them on the train, but it's just a natural progression of what happened. I mean, one of the cops pulled a gun on a train, and that train was full of people that were on their way to that movement, that rally. And because of that heightened tension and, those heightened feelings, a riot broke out on the subway, and the Joker escapes. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't this elaborate plan for him to, get the cops off his back. It just happened. Situation. It's just a natural progression of everything. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really enjoy about the movie.
So it's kind of like the Joker essentially lucks his way into these situations, and because he just happens to be in Gotham City where there's so much civil unrest, and because people were inspired by him, and that's kind of near the first act of the movie where he gets picked on and beaten up by these 3 Wall Street guys, and he eventually uses his gun to shoot them and kill them all, and that kind of leads to this urban legend of a guy in a clown mask taking down these Wall Street people. And that leads into this whole giant climax where all these people in clown masks are essentially inspired, and they come to see Arthur, who has now become the Joker, essentially as their leader. And it's just kind of crazy, and it makes you wonder, don't you think that people who had watched this movie would have been concerned that it would have inspired more people to come up and try to emulate what Arthur was doing?
Like I said, not really, because people are, I don't know, I think people are more rational than what the media tries to portray. This movie, if you have problems differentiating between reality and fiction, then this movie's gonna, kind of push you to do something. This movie's gonna be hard on you. Mm-hmm. But I feel like most people understand that this is a comic book story. This is a comic book character. It's a comic book world. It's not our world, even though it's more realistic than usual comic books. I feel like I guess I just have more faith in people in general, that they have the sense not to do something stupid. And it seems like that's been the case for the most part. So
that's actually good to hear. It just feels like everything's been so sensationalized when it comes to Joker that we kind of lose the main message of what the Joker movie was trying to convey. And that's essentially that there are people who have mental health problems who do need help. Mm-hmm. And when their resources are slowly taken away from them, it might lead them to some potentially huge negative consequences. So I personally believe that Joker is a movie that's all about being able to empathize with these people, to basically not necessarily see them as potentially ticking time bombs, but as people worthy of love and consideration and charity, to be able to help them out. If you're nice to these people, they'll be nice to you back, or at least they won't try to kill you or something like that. And we can have a whole debate about the ambiguous nature of whether Joker did kill certain people in this movie. But overall, what Joker is essentially about. It's about in moments of like huge civil unrest, or when people are just like constantly fighting each other over resources or wealth inequality, or how they have suspicions or anger over like politicians or whatever, that if we're all nicer to each other, things can get better.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at people differently. There are some people there's a guy I go to church with, that's been trying to spend more time with me, but like I haven't really wanted to, but like it's at this, after I kind of watched this movie, I kind of, started like thinking about it, and I was like, you know what, just be nice to him. I don't have to be his best friend or anything, but just, be nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's just looking for some company. And maybe that's all it takes. So yeah, I feel like this movie does more good than harm. Yeah, it says a lot.
Exactly. Are there any aspects of the film that maybe you didn't like too much, or that you thought maybe could have been done better?
So I think everything surrounding Batman. Like I don't know. I feel like we didn't need to have his mom and Thomas Wayne be connected, which they did kind of subvert your expectations with that. They kind of, what's the phrase? Like they led you down one road, but then that conclusion wasn't actually the fact. Like you expected his mom to actually for him to actually be Thomas Wayne's son, but no. He's not his son. He's not even actually her son. At least not biologically. And, some stuff did happen to him. But anyways, so I wasn't a fan too much of everything surrounding Bruce, because I didn't like how suddenly him and his parents are walking out of the theater and they get gunned down by some random clown. And that's why he has such a hate on for the Joker. Like I didn't need that.
So you're not fond of this Bruce Wayne is going to be Batman, but by the time he grows up and becomes Batman, Arthur Fleck is going to be at least like 60 to 70 years old, and he'll be too old and decrepit to pose a serious threat. It's not a DC Comics accurate or like faithful to the comics universe. It does its own thing, and thus I'll be honest, every time I think about how successful this incarnation of the Joker has been, the more I think about how if Matt Reeves decides to use the Joker for his upcoming Batman film, he doesn't necessarily have to bring Joaquin Phoenix, but I do think it would behoove him and the audience if he were to use a depiction of the character that either has a similar origin to Joaquin's portrayal of the Joker, but maybe played by a different actor.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get that. That could work. I personally am still hoping for more Jared Leto, but might and probably might not happen. But yeah, that was like the one big thing that I didn't like. I'm a firm believer in his just typical origin story. He's just a kid that wanted to go out and see his hero on the screen. He had a good night with his family. And, he walks out of the theater with his family and they get gunned down by some random dude. Mm-hmm. And, he takes on himself because, he pushed his parents to, go have a good time. I don't need it to be like some sort of mob hit or some clown from the Joker movement just popping up and shooting Thomas and Martha Wayne.
It wouldn't be the first time that the Joker has been involved with the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. If you happen to remember Batman '89, it ends up, it was Jack Nicholson's Joker.
I wasn't a fan of that.
That was pretty random too, actually. But at least it was Jack Nicholson's Joker prior to becoming the Joker.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit better. Also, why was Martha Wayne so old? She looked like she was 70.
Yeah, and the guy who plays Thomas isn't like super young either. Like originally they were supposed to have Alec Baldwin, but this actor, maybe they aged him up. I don't know if you ever watched Person of Interest. I know that's where I know the actor from. But
Brett Cullen.
I don't think he ever looked that old in that show.
Yeah, no, like he still looks like could be like, late 50s. But Martha just looked old. Like, I'm sorry, but I was like, there's no way you had a kid at your age.
Mm.
Um, that's mean, but yeah. So that was my biggest issue, and I think that there was one too many dance scenes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you which scene they should have cut.
I don't know if you happen to. Did you ever happen to read any of the script leaks with the Joker
No,
movie? Okay, so I
I
have
did
to
not.
admit, I did read a little bit of like the synopsises from the DCEU leaks Reddit subreddit, and they were talking about the general plot of the film. So I kind of had an idea of what the film was going to be or how it was going to have events. But eventually, of course, it was something completely different. Though the whole aspect of people being inspired to start like a revolt in the name or with wearing Joker masks, that was present in the leak script. So I knew that was eventually going to happen. But a lot of aspects were changed, and that kind of brings me to one of the other topics, which is we haven't talked about the character portrayed by Zazie Beetz, and that she leads into a very interesting element of Arthur Fleck's arc being this woman who he meets one time, and throughout the film you see the two of them connect with each other until you realize at this pivotal moment when he shows up in her apartment that A, all of it was fake, and that B, essentially he imagined her the entire time. And I was wondering how you felt about that particular revelation, and do you think her fate was left ambiguous on purpose or because it was essentially to save time and
So I think for sure she's dead. Um, but that was like something I was on the fence on when I was watching it, because it's kind of like it's a very cliched movie, movie trick, or just a very common
trope, essentially.
It's just very cliche in stories. They have the character who has been talking to these people and has been interacting with these people, and it's not like none of it's been real. So on one hand, I was a little bit annoyed, but then it's all about how you tell the story. And that's actually the reason why I'm actually not too against spoilers, because as long as you tell the story well, as long as the journey is good, then the spoiler doesn't really matter. And that's kind of what it was like with this, is that the story was just so good that I didn't care that it was cliched, because they got me. Like through this whole time, he's having these interactions with her, and he's following her, and she's just okay with it. They kind of raised some red flags, but I didn't think too much into it.
You didn't think that a woman as attractive as her would eventually fall for a guy who looks like Arthur Fleck?
Yeah, that was also just like, huh? Okay. And like him, it kind of tipped me off though. I started to suspect it when at the comedy club, when everyone starts laughing at his jokes and she's having a good time. That's when it started to kind of I kind of
realized
started
that
to suspect,
maybe
but
he was imagining all of this in his head, essentially.
yeah, like I started wondering if some of it wasn't embellished, and but at the end of the day, it's actually an aspect I really enjoyed, because everyone has fantasies, and I can totally relate to that, because I like half my life, like half my time I spend in my own head, in my own imagination, because I'm bored with reality, but like. So I think everyone can relate to having these fantasies, but then like there's always that clear point of like, oh wait, that's too far. So yeah, I enjoy how that had that relatability. But as for I can't even remember the character's name.
Sophie.
Sophie. That was actually probably one of the more terrifying moments of the film. Was just him sitting in that apartment and just him walking in and just making himself at home. And she just has no idea who this guy is. Mm-hmm. And, she's got a kid in the back. And I think that was like when it really started to get terrifying for me.
Yeah.
Because I think this movie is one of like the more horrifying films I've ever seen. But it's also just so brilliant.
Exactly. It's not necessarily a comic book movie where you expect the good guys to win and the bad guys to lose. This is a movie where the setting, the aesthetic, the style of the film, the inspirations that's been widely talked about, from Taxi Driver to The King of Comedy, both by Martin Scorsese, is not necessarily a movie where you think the good guys will or can or should win. It's going to be a movie, it's going to be more of a character study, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea what Arthur Fleck is going to do. We actually don't know if he did kill her or not. I'm actually on the side that he didn't necessarily kill her. There are reasons to believe that he would have just left her alone and that she essentially closed the door after he left and stayed in hiding. But I can definitely see arguments for why you would say that she did die.
Like, in the moment, I figured she was either going to die or be raped. I mean, I felt like those were the only two options of where the story was going to go. But I feel like she is dead. I don't know. I'd have to see the movie again. Like I said, it's been a couple weeks. Because like I remember thinking that maybe one of them will die, maybe not both of them, like her and her kid.
That is pretty dark to think about. Yeah, but the movie leaves it ambiguous. So maybe we're supposed to have our own interpretation of what happened. So I'm going to choose to believe that he did spare her, because one of the points of the film is that everyone who Arthur has killed has done him wrong in some way. He kills those Wall Street guys because they basically like assaulted him. He kills his former coworker because he essentially got him fired. He essentially got Arthur fired from his job. He kills Murray Franklin because he is so angry with how Murray Franklin treated him before he even came up on stage. So I don't know if that necessarily also applies to Sophie as a character, because she doesn't essentially do him any wrong, and also because you don't think that you think that maybe Arthur has like maybe a small shred of morality left. Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, until we get a conclusive answer, yeah, exactly, from Todd Phillips, we might never know for sure. But I just wanted to kind of talk about a couple of things I really liked about the film, which is, for one, the score. I don't know if you happen to have like that cello theme still in your head, or just like all that music. I will admit, when I first watched Joker, I didn't think the dark cello, the soundtrack, really fit the tone of a 70s movie. But the more I think about it, I don't think Joker is necessarily meant to emulate what the 1970s or like early 1980s were supposed to be like. It's more of a setting that makes sense for the kind of story that's going to happen. But the cello is essentially an expression of what Arthur is feeling at the time. And I think it really comes to light in that very famous bathroom dance scene, which is, I don't think, something we've talked about yet. We learned after the movie had come out that that whole scene where after Arthur shoots those three men, he goes into a bathroom to hide, but then he also has this dance, and this dance is kind of like this full expression of how he's feeling in his soul after doing it. It's like a cathartic moment. It's like he's done something that he would kind of be okay with doing again. So I don't know if you have the same concept when you first saw that scene, or how do you feel about that bathroom dance scene overall?
I really liked it. It's brilliant. Because like the whole just like him killing those guys was shocking, but him walking down that guy and shooting him, deciding to do that was even more just like, whoa. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you said, I feel like that moment in the bathroom is when everything really starts to shift. And that dance is just him kind of like him being more comfortable with what he just did. I don't know. I don't know how to quite explain it. It is that moment of expression. And for me, like I said, it came off as him making himself comfortable with what he just did and accepting that this might actually be amusing or, like you said, cathartic for him.
For me, I think it's like he's found his calling in life, and it's not necessarily
Yeah.
to inflict to give people smiles and joy. In fact, it's probably the complete opposite.
It's to make him feel happy. It's to bring
Exactly.
a smile up to his face.
Exactly. Were there any other scenes in the film that you wanted to talk about that we haven't yet, or any particular moments that really kind of like stirred you, or that you still remember from watching the movie?
I remember feeling completely sick during the scene where he finds out that he's adopted and what happened to him as a child. That was just, again, like a frequently used story point. Like the same thing. It reminded me of a lot of Rorschach from Watchmen.
Okay.
But I remember feeling really sick at that point. And the scene I think that's probably my favorite is the whole scene where he's getting ready to go to the Murray Franklin show. He's putting on his makeup and his coworkers come over, and like that was like the one scene where I was actually laughing. Nervously laughing, of course, because it was kind of messed up. But just like the whole like his coworker, the midget,
Yeah.
not being able to open the door.
No, yeah, because he had latched it and it's too high up for
Yeah.
his coworker to actually reach, and you're just like, oh my god, did he do that on purpose so that he could eventually kill this poor guy? Yeah. And you're just like,
Yeah, it's like,
it's kind of
is he gonna kill him?
hilarious, but holy crap, yeah.
But like, no, he's nice to him. And that felt very Joker-like to me as well. That he's not gonna just kill everyone. Some people, for some reason, he's just, he has his own reasons for why he shouldn't kill them. So that whole scene was, I think, my favorite scene, and just like the whole subsequent him coming down the hallway to hit the Hey song, and dancing down the steps, and
I think
being
that was
chased
the
by
only
the
time
police.
in the movie where I kind of smiled, because I was just like, yeah, I can see why he'd be happy at this point. He's got his suit on. The whole metaphor in the movie is that every time he goes up the stairs, like near the beginning of the movie on his way home, he's always sad. He's always kind of like depressed. He's been beaten down in life, but now that he's kind of like worn the makeup, he's done like some reprehensible actions. When he goes down the stairs to kind of like be a metaphor for his slowly declining sanity, he's happy about it. That's why he's able to do that dance.
Yeah. And this is like, I don't know, like when you're watching it, it's like you're feeling that confidence too. You're like, yeah. I mean, but it's like, I don't know if it's the music, because he's going to do something horrible and you don't really want him to do it, but at the same time, you also feel confident like he does. But yeah, just like I really love the whole subway scene of him being chased by the police, and him kind of realizing, because like he has this, after the cop fires his gun and like the people are beating him and his partner down, Arthur kind of has this look on his face like he's just realized that by creating chaos he can get away with whatever he wants. Like he has power, and then it's like right before he puts on the masker, I think. But yeah, it's like this really just very small but profound moment, I think, where he just kind of realizes he has so much control by taking away control from others.
Exactly. I'm trying to think if there's any other aspects to the film that I really, really enjoyed. Because I'll be honest, I had a very overwhelming sense of dread throughout watching the film. Personally,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before in my review, but it's not a movie that I'm so willing to revisit anytime soon. Though, of course, I'll get the Blu-ray. It's just one of those movies where if you're in the mood for something uncomfortable, something that's a bit more depressing, something that's going to basically like make you think and feel sad about a few different things, then this is the movie for you. But at the same time, you don't necessarily get that impression, because considering its box office success and its origins in comic books, you're like, this is a modern day blockbuster. Why am I not like super excited to watch it over and over again? And I think what Joker has done is that, unlike maybe past superhero movies where they've been like perceived as dark, like Man of Steel or Batman v Superman or Dark Knight, Joker is one of those movies where it makes you think about things in very uncomfortable circumstances that maybe you want to think to yourself, maybe you can do better. Maybe you're part of the problem. And it's not a movie that makes you feel good. And that's kind of like the final point that I get from watching the Joker movie is that this movie, and we've had some arguments back and forth about on the internet about whether superhero movies are considered art or they're considered cinema. And one of the definitions apparently of cinema is that these are movies that are supposed to be about movies that are intended to shock, provoke, elicit an emotional response from you, to make you see things in different ways and to experience stories in ways that only film can. So I'll be willing to risk it and say that Joker is definitely an example of what cinema can be, and because it's blended so well with the idea of a comic book movie, that maybe we're seeing a new paradigm here of films that can be called cinema but have their origins with superhero and comic book movies.
Yeah, I agree completely. I also just want to say I love the ending scene. Just where he, just that whole conversation with the therapist, and she's like, "Why are you laughing? What's so funny?" And he's like, "You wouldn't get it." And also just like, I just want to say Joaquin Phoenix has like really entrancing eyes. Like the color of his eyes is, I don't know, hypnotizing. It's weird. But the whole ending is fantastic. But I totally agree with you. And I don't want to be that guy, that fan. But I feel like definitely DC has a better grasp of what is comic book movie cinema. Because you have so many, because they're allowed to, which, I mean, they are and they aren't. It's ironic because, there's been so much studio interference. But they have been allowed to put their stamp and their vision into play. Zack Snyder's movies are his movies. Like they have his style. And they are very intellectual and philosophical. And I feel like, I'll just say it, I feel like DC has done it better. And I feel like people are going to start realizing that, movies like Man of Steel aren't dark. They're just serious. And it's movies like Joker that are truly dark. They tax your emotions and your mind. And I feel like with other comic book movies, it's just like they're pushing you to feel certain things. They're trying to elicit certain reactions and emotions from you. They want you to cry now. They want you to laugh now. But with like these movies that DC have done, it's not like, oh, you're supposed to cry now, you're supposed to laugh now. It's just you end up laughing and crying in certain places, and it's just because the story is being told. If that makes any sense.
That's why I've been so frustrated with Marvel movies as of late, because they're always trying to essentially go for one single emotion. It's always make you feel good, whether it's through laughing or watching something epic. You're never meant to experience like the ups and downs of watching a film that makes you feel both sad and happy at the same time. What Marvel movies have done, I feel like, at least with the majority that I've seen, is that they always want to make you feel good. Like you've eaten something really like delicious, that you're always coming out of the theater really like optimistic and glad that you saw it and entertained. But then because there's no emotional range or there's no thing that sticks into your head, you kind of forget about it afterwards. And that's something that I feel has been a flaw with Marvel movies for the longest time. And if anything, I hope that the success of Joker has kind of given Marvel maybe someday more impetus to maybe try something riskier in the future. Maybe do something different. They've got streaming services. They've pretty much have dominated the box office in the last couple of years. I think they'd be willing to make a couple of risks.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And it's it's always geared towards making you forget what you just saw. They don't want you to think about it too hard. and they want you to leave happy. But I remember talking with people about Batman v Superman when it just came out, and it's like, it's not fun. It's not a fun movie. It's like, are you kidding me? I had tons of fun. I've always wanted to see Batman as truly Batman. He's not a guy that's not quite a hero. I mean, he's a hero, obviously, but not someone that you necessarily like. He's not a likable person.
He's got to be angry, a little bit unstable paranoid, if he's willing to go out in a costume and beat up people every night.
Right? Yeah. He's a very scary person. He's a very intense person, and that's what BVS did. And I find that extremely fun. And I find it extremely fun to watch him brutalize a room full of people.
That's an interesting way to phrase things, but I'll take you at your word for it. But I actually kind of agree with you there. Like, there's an enjoyment from seeing your favorite comic book heroes go through some very dark paths, because you respect these characters. You want to see them done in the best way possible. And honestly, I feel like if you only want to see like an optimistic, happy-go-lucky side of a superhero, then you're not really appreciating that character for what they are. The whole point is to test these characters, to make them go through some really like horrendous stuff, to test their soul, the heart of what makes them be as heroes. And if you're all constantly not upping the stakes, you're not giving them material to really like challenge or give them like ways out potentially out of being a hero, then you're not necessarily making them great heroes in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of what I like about Joker overall, is that it leads to these discussions, and it leads to the possibilities of what superhero comic book films can be now in an age post-Joker, post a movie making almost $1 billion without China and still going.
Yeah.
And
it's a movie that you can talk about. It's thought-provoking, and it's something you can sit down and talk with your friends for hours. And it's not another one of those movies, comic book movies, where it's just like, oh, I can't wait for what happens next. Like, what do you think is going to happen next? It's like, no. Let's talk about the movie that we just saw. Let's talk about what it means and what certain scenes mean. That's what stories are about. They're supposed to make you think. They're supposed to make you reflect. And this is definitely fits into that category. It definitely does that.
Exactly. So I think we'll call it an episode for episode 31 of CBM Voice Chat. I've been your host, Neophant, and thank you as always, Manta, for joining me in talking about the movie today.
Absolutely. I feel really good about this episode. It's been a while since we've done this, and I think this is some of our best work.
Yeah, I agree. I think when it comes to movies that has so much substance to talk about, we can have like these great discussions and these further like lookings into what makes these films tick. So hopefully we'll get more of these, but nevertheless, I hope everyone can come back next time. We'll be talking about maybe some of our favorite comic book movies of the past year, maybe our top 10 favorite movies of 2019, maybe what we're looking forward to for the rest of the year or for the coming years, and just in general, just appreciating what comic book movies are, because this is what CBM Voice Chat is all about. It's about talking about what we loved as kids and what I think at this point everybody else is going to love as well. So thank you so much, Manta. Don't forget, Amen. And I'm not going to forget this time. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Feel free to comment on the podcast or the YouTube video or however we end up posting this. And for everyone who's been listening for this time, thank you so much. Take care and have a good night.
Thanks.